Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Postgame Huddle Spring Game Edition. I am Kevin Noon. I am joined by Garrett Seawright and Michael Pettit as we are here to get you up to the point of where Ryan Day and the Buckeyes, the victorious Buckeyes, since you can't really lose the spring game, I guess, start to talk to the media. So, gentlemen, 80,000 announced. The day warmed up a little bit. Impressions of the spring game?
Well, I think there are going to be two things that are going to be big talking points that we'll probably chat about here at some point. Is one, the defense looks spectacular. The defensive backfield is phenomenal, and looks outstanding. And I think the other part is there's going to be a lot of discussion, talk, and maybe some consternation about the quarterback play. I don't know that anybody probably leaves today thinking that they have a definitive answer on who that guy is or whether they feel great about that guy. But I think there is a lot of excitement for the defense that it looks really, really good.
How about you, Mr. Pettit? How do you feel about it as we are just about to go final here?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Defense definitely looked good, and I was happy to see that they actually did a few more things in the spring game this year, whereas the last couple of years it's just been rush 4 or drop 8. They only rushed 3, but they actually did call a few blitzes, a few creepers today, kind of mixed things up. So it was fun to watch, and I'm not really putting too much stock into what I saw from the quarterbacks today. It's just one example of, a million more they're going to have in fall camp. So
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to take a lot out of a spring game. I mean, we've seen in the past where Ohio State would split the rosters and the Scarlet would have an offense and a defense and the Gray would have an offense and a defense, and you really didn't have enough pieces to make anything work in the first place. They here went true offense against true defense. We get a quarter of thud, and then we get, the fourth quarter was a running clock. It was over in a hiccup. So really, I guess focusing kind of on the second and third, the defense was nasty. I mean, I'm going to want to go back and look at some of these interceptions, but they seem to be. It almost seems like they knew what was coming, and that's what the result of 15 practices. And you're not doing a lot of install per se. You're working on yourself. So, I think that the defense certainly had an advantage there.
Yeah, I think I would caution anybody to take too much away from a spring game, but I think you're right that you got to get a little bit your hand tipped to know what's coming. But you've practiced against that same offense for a couple of weeks now. But the athleticism, I think, shines through whether you know what's coming or not. The technique comes through whether you know what's coming or not. The depth comes through whether you know what's coming or not. They have done a really nice job defensively in the recruitment. Caleb Downs comes in and looks like a difference maker right away. And I think they're embracing kind of putting guys in those playmaker roles rather than, putting people in okay, this is your position. This is what you do. It seems like, and Michael talked about it, the creepers, I think is a nice little wrinkle that they probably called more today than they did all of last season. So I think being a little bit adaptable is a nice spot to be in right now. And in showing that in the spring game, I don't think is a problem.
You got here early.
What is going to be the narrative that once everybody's watched the game and has a chance to think about it, what do you think is going to be what we're going to have to kind of hear about for the next several months until we get closer to fall camp? I mean, I think some of the laundry list of things are, does Ohio State need to go and get an offensive lineman in the portal? And if so, I mean, is it a tackle? Is it a guard? Is it a one-year plug-in, or is it somebody for depth because they've missed along the way in their recruitment? Is it if you have 5 quarterbacks, you have none? I mean, what do you think we're going to hear the most of? It doesn't necessarily mean what's correct, but what do you think we're going to hear them or have beaten over our heads for coming months?
I'll go ahead and answer this and actually say, based on what I watched today, I don't think there's going to be any, specific narrative like we've seen in the past. Like a great example was like in 2019 when Justin Fields' spring game performance was whatever. Matt Baldwin looked a lot better in that spring game. So you knew right away for the next however many months, that was going to be a big topic of discussion. I don't really notice. I didn't really notice.
That was me. Sorry. Go ahead. I'm trying to open multiple windows, and I gave myself audio feedback loop.
No, it's okay. But yeah, I don't know that there's really any narrative, anything I saw today that is going to create some sort of narrative that's going to be on everyone's mind for the next few months, the way we've seen in the past. However, I absolutely would be open to them bringing in a portal offensive lineman.
What about with you, Garrett? I mean, when you sit there and obviously we came into the spring with a lot of conversation of this is going to be a case of we're going to get, we're going to see Julian Sain competing for that starting job. We're going to see Jeremiah Smith pushing to surpass Emeka Egbuka at this point. I mean, all the quarterbacks to a certain extent didn't have a chance to really kind of air it out. When it came to Jeremiah Smith, it looks like the defense was bound and determined that they weren't going to let this kid beat them again. I mean, he has been having his way in practice. Davison Igbinosun, Jordan Hancock, they were very handsy with him out there because they weren't going to get mossed in front of 80,000 people in the stadium and have to sit there and watch that highlight reel over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think when you look defensively, I don't think there's going to be much narrative, much question marks. I don't think it's going to be one of those spots where we're sitting around in July going like, oh, man, I hope they can rush the passer. I hope they can defend the run. I hope they can, pick some guys off. I think defense, there are going to be no questions. Offense, I think there are going to be several questions. I think one question is the running back room without Dallin Hayden is going to look somewhat top heavy. And I don't think you have to really be all that worried about getting to your third running back. At least I hope you don't have to be worried about getting to your third running back. But I think that could be a question. I agree with Michael and with other people who are like, I think there's going to be a determination of whether or not the offensive line talent is there, and you just got to find which five guys are the right five guys in which spots, or if you need to hit the portal when it opens here in the next couple of days and really be active in there. And then I think the question mark at quarterback is going to persist until we get an answer. And I don't know that people are going to be overly thrilled with the options or the answer after what they saw today. Now, that's not saying that by the time you play Purdue in November or whatever, that you might not be like, okay, we've definitely got our guy. We feel really good about that spot. But I think on April 13th, there are questions about who's going to helm that spot and which guy is the guy.
I'm just messaging somebody as I'm getting things kind of put together. We're waiting on the presser. And actually, here we go. Here we go. Give me 1 second to switch this.
Folks, Keith, you can just turn up the questions if you can. You got mics, okay. Right over here, for this press conference over to the left, Cam Teague Robinson, The Athletic.
Ryan, there you go. You talked, I think it was a couple weeks ago, about you wanted to see more from Will, but something that stood out early was just his pocket presence. He seemed okay, seemed like good today, especially on that throw to Mech on the sideline. Just how have you seen his growth as he's gotten more experience in this offense?
Yeah, I think the pocket presence is something that was there early on when he got into spring practice. We were able to see that. That's something that is difficult to teach, that your eyes are downfield, but you're feeling the rush. It does help when you're north of 6'4". And but he stands in there. You can see that. And so, I just think that over the spring, the timing is increasing. It's getting better over and over again. I think the more reps that all these guys get, the better. But it looks like, I guess, during that drive, he had some nice completions in there. And I think there was a sack in there, maybe held on a little too long. And wind was blowing pretty hard today. And so I think we underthrew a couple balls. But overall, I thought he had at least, had a good comfort level for the first drive in the shoe.
Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm going to make any declarations right now, but we'll look at the film and see what it looks like, and then decide where to go from there. But I don't have much to say about it right now.
Over to the right here, Austin Ward, the podcast.
Ryan, what do you go into the summer feeling the best about with this team?
I would say our experience, just a bunch of guys who played a whole bunch of football. Today, I think there was about 10 players who came up and wanted more snaps today. And, but look at next year is a long one. And there's a lot of guys out there who have played a lot of football. Some of them, well over 1,000 snaps. And, the number one thing in something like this is to stay healthy. I mean, you want to get good work in there the best you can, but you got to stay healthy. It's too important. There's too much invested in these players now more than ever. And so, I feel like, we had to get those guys out of there. But I think these guys have played a lot of football. When you look at our defense, you look at the back end, you look at the front, and then those linebackers. I mean, it's a good looking group. And you saw that all spring. They're flying around, they're getting it. And they all want to play more and show off in this game. But, that's our job as coaches to kind of hold them back. But you can see a lot of the talent out there. I thought the corners really did a nice job of covering. You saw the guys get some pressures on the quarterback. I think on the offensive side, you see again guys like Emeka who have been out there before, and Donovan Jackson, and so there is experience both running backs. I thought all the running backs did a nice job today. Certainly for James and Sam, getting the first opportunity to get tackled was good. We'll look at the film because that is different, but I think we have some real good playmakers on the perimeter. I mean, I could kind of go on and on, but again, I guess if you said the number one thing, it would probably be our experience in game reps.
Over to the left, Rob Aller, the Dispatch, and then I wanted to go to Nathan Baird. Rob?
Yeah, Ryan, with the younger quarterbacks in particular, is part of the idea. You did a lot of quick outs, a lot of swing passes, keep their confidence up. I mean, can they lose confidence in a game like this, or how do you manage them, I guess? Well,
you try to get into a rhythm, for them just to get some completions, because it all is happening fast, and that's kind of how it works. When you're doing everything for the first time, there's certain things that you're learning and you're growing, and you want to make things easy for them. But again, it was, I don't know what the wind ended up being, but I mean, it was gusting pretty good in there. And so, all it takes is a little bit of a, gust of wind, and it's in the DB's hands, and that can rattle your confidence. So to your point, try to get in a rhythm a little bit. Did try to push the ball down a little bit down the field, but probably could have done it a little bit more, but wanted to get the ball out in space to our guys. And like you said, but I think overall with all the guys, I guess we were 37 of 57, but we did have the 3 interceptions. So I think we at least got some good, snaps on film. That was good. And I guess we ran it 49 times. So this will be a lot of film to watch and grow from, but we want to be able to, some of those passes, those are like long handoffs for us. We want to stretch the field horizontally, and then we want to stretch the field vertically. And, we didn't get as much of an opportunity to do that today, but there were a couple of play action passes where they kind of ran out of there. We checked it down and made good yardage on it.
Some QBs running a little more. I know that's been what you've talked about. We saw a little more of that today.
And you can see, like Air, I think had 3 carries for 25, Devin 3 for 24. And so, Lincoln, I think had, 16 yards rushing. So, when you have a quarterback who can run, it does change the numbers, as we all know. You guys have seen that over the years, and it's going to be a weapon for us this year because all of our quarterbacks are athletic enough to do that.
Folks, I'm going to bring Tyleek Williams and send him into the back right now, but over to the right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Ryan, on Wednesday, you said that you wanted to have at least a projection on where you were at with the right side of the offensive line coming out of spring. Do you feel like you have that projection right now? And I know you still have to watch the film, but do you feel like you know what's going on there or what you think might happen?
No. I don't think we're there right now. But again, like you said, kind of watch this film and then go back, evaluate the entire spring, and then kind of see where to go from there.
That you want Josh Pryor to play right tackle, but somebody needs to step up at left tackle to allow that to happen?
Well, we know that Josh can play right tackle, and he's done that before. But we want to find the best 5. We feel like Josh is one of our best 5. If we can figure that part of it out, that'd be great. He has played a little bit of guard, but he's also played tackle. So the goal is to find our best 5.
Over to the left, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
Right, to go back to the quarterback running concept, obviously there's a fine line sometimes between using that as a weapon and then using it as a crutch, I guess. How are you evaluating that this spring from that group? And I guess especially how is this defense giving you a better indication of that just by how tight their coverage is, how much pressure they can bring?
Yeah, I think that's the thing here right now is, you feel like if you can stop the running game, you feel like you're doing a pretty good job. If you feel like, you can pass on our DBs, you're doing a pretty good job. If you feel like you can cover some of our receivers, you're doing a good job. So this is back and forth on a daily basis. And it's great competition, individually going against really good players, but also against a great unit on defense and a great unit on offense. But, there are ways, like in particular today, we were doing some open side reading of the defensive end, and if the defense decides they're going to crash it and make the quarterback run the ball, then that's their decision. Now, we also know that if that's going on too much, we know ways to handle that, whether it's bringing a tight end over to block them, to make sure the running backs are getting enough carries. So it just depends on the design of the play. And today that's what happened. But, we have ways to adjust that based on if we're going to a game plan.
Over here, Tim May, the Tim May podcast.
Just two quickies. Ryan, number one, is it now tradition that a Griffin will score the last touchdown in the spring
I guess
game?
so. That was pretty wild.
But number two, you talked about a second ago. I think the depth maybe at cornerback is a little bit overlooked. Calvin Simpson-Hunt, for example, stepped up today. What have you seen of him in particular this spring? Because he was highly rated coming in, and et cetera.
Good player. Like you said, highly rated, but good player. He's growing every day. He came in the summer, so this is his first full spring. And, for Lincoln and for for Jason Moore and, I think Cade McDonald, those guys all came in the summer. So this is their first full year. They still haven't been on campus for a year. You think that they've been around for a long time, but they haven't. So now you're starting to see him get comfortable with the calls. And we've said this before, we have got to play depth, and you're good to see Jermaine good in there, a little bit of nickel. Obviously, Jordan's going to be the starting nickel in there, but he can jump out to corner. So that gives us some flexibility. And then seeing Calvin out there as well. And the other guy who really had a good spring until, we had to have a little procedure done just out of caution was Lorenzo Styles. So to your point, I think that there is good depth there, but we're going to need them all.
Is this as good a depth as you've seen defensively in a few years? I mean, from your vantage point.
At corner, yes. I think we're still, for me to say that the best we've seen at all positions. No, I don't think we're there. Yeah. But at corner and, maybe at a couple other positions and then some other positions, we got to solidify a little better.
Okay. Final question for Coach Day, Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row.
Ryan, you've talked a lot about needing guys for 16, 17 games in depth, but one of the positions that we haven't really talked about that with is receiver. Like, do you feel like you guys have the receiver depth that you need right now? And can those guys, those top 4 or 5, play all 16, or do you need guys, younger guys or veterans who haven't really contributed to step up?
Yeah, I think it's a legitimate question. I think when you have Mecca and Carnell, and then Jaden Ballard, Jeremiah, then you get into, Bryson Rogers, who has done some really good things this spring. I know he had a couple of tough plays today, but we think he can really help us next year. We're missing Brandon Ennis. Brandon Ennis, same thing. He was having, a lot of momentum, and then there was a procedure. We just felt like out of caution, we had to get it done. We just didn't want it to linger, so we did that. So we'll need him to step up in a big way. And then, to your point, we're going to need a couple more guys to step up to build that depth there, because we do have some really good players, but we're going to need them all. So I think it's important that some of those younger guys do step up. We are going to get, Milan this summer, and we're going to get, Demarion Witten, who's going to play, a little bit of receiver, a little bit of tight end. So we do have some young guys, and to your point, they're going to have to help us.
Do you think that Jaden is in that group right now that can help you?
I think Jaden took a step here this last week. We've been challenging him. There's been a couple plays, one in particular, he needed to make some plays to say, okay, I'm here and you can count on me. There was a really contested play in the red zone that he made. He made a big play on a post out here the other day. So you're starting to see him make those plays. And if he can do that for us, with his, deep speed down the field, he can really stretch the defense. And so we're going to need him to. And we did see things in the last couple of weeks that led us to believe that he can.
I'm sorry, Coach. I got one more. Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch, and then we've got Coach Knowles.
Ryan, as you look back on not just today, but all 15 practices and assess the impact that Chip's had for you guys, is there something you feel like, or just in general, where he's helped maybe the most, where his presence the last 2 months has given you guys the biggest boost?
Yeah, I think he brings one voice to the defense, and I think that's very, very important. Certainly has an unbelievable history of running the football, and I think when you start to tie in some of those quarterback runs, and you notice those quarterback runs aren't designed quarterback runs really. Most of them are reading an end, and those aren't hellacious hits. They're things where we're going to keep guys upright, and he does a really good job of that. But the other thing too with Chip was, he got here just a couple weeks before spring started. So, we kind of got the spring going, pushed through the spring, learned about the personnel. I think the next couple of months will be important to figure out where we go now. What do we do? What does the install look in the preseason? And then we go from there. So like any spring, you want to identify the personnel and get guys better, and then really dive into the scheme and the chemistry as we head into the summer.
Coach, thank you.
Do you feel like you're compelled to let the quarterbacks know where they stand before Tuesday?
We're going to give them feedback for sure, and go from there. But yeah, I think we, after you go through 15 practices, you want to give feedback. Yeah.
Great, Coach. Thank you very much.
You said Brandon's injury is not long-term.
No.
Coach, thank you. Yep. All right, folks, we're going to bring Coach Jim Knowles up here, and then after that, we'll have Chip Kelly. We will open up the floor for Coach Knowles. Over here to the right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Hey, Jim. Tywan Malone is a guy who really flashed out there today. I'm just curious, where does Tywan fit in your depth defensive line right now? It's a guy who probably doesn't get talked about as much, but where does he fit in that right now? What have you seen from him in the spring?
He's developed for sure. Wasn't quite ready last year for a lot of reps, but he's shown marked improvement. So, long season, we play a lot of guys up front. We really need him to come along, and he showed flashes of that.
Over to the left, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
With guys like Lathan and Malik, and I guess Lorenzo also not being able to play, and that's been, I guess, the case through most of spring. Just what did that open up for you as far as developing more depth at safety, and how have you seen guys like Bonsu and McLean assert themselves this spring?
Yeah, every situation like that gives somebody an opportunity. Our depth was really down at safety this spring. So, because you had Lathan, you had Jihad, you had Malik, and then Lorenzo. So it opened up opportunities, and Bonsu is a guy who really got a lot of reps, and you saw him improve. And then McLean, I think, is a great plus. I mean, he is a guy that has football intelligence. He's picked it up. He's kind of those incoming freshmen who still should be in high school. He's a guy I think you're going to point to, and you can see right now he's going to be a player.
Over to the right, Austin Ward, the podcast.
A healthy Mitchell Melton. How does he fit in for your defense? What does he bring to it?
Yeah, Mitch is that combination player, in our 4 down, he's a guy that can do a lot of things, drop, fold in there and make plays. You see some of that all the time. Really athletic. We're kind of loaded at that end position, so he's going to play there. But, like I said last year, we haven't needed it, but he's a guy you would point to along with CJ Hicks, for the long season. People get injured, you get a little light inside. It's always hard on the defensive tackles. But if you're going to play with 3 ends, that Mitch is a guy who definitely can do all that. He has that.
Over to the left, Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Jim, you've talked about this before, but I think in past years where you're going up against a really talented receiver group offense, to encourage your players it's not okay if they give up the play, and to go nearly almost the first half today where the offense didn't get in the end zone until late in the second half. And you guys have guys down in the secondary. Just what did you think of that sort of trend and how it's evolved and the way you guys almost shut them out the first half?
Yeah, I think it's become an expectation now. Our DBs, our BIA, best in America, we led the country in pass defense. Right, I think it was 96 when I got here, and it was number 1 last year. So they've taken that spirit. So it's a competitive spirit. It's an expectation now. It doesn't matter who we're going against. They view it as a standard. So that was good to see in the first half.
Over to the right, Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row.
Jim, we've talked about safety changing the way that you play defense and the Leo and the linebackers, but how much does having the depth that you guys have at defensive tackle change the way that you can do things defensively?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to play to your strengths, and that's my job is to what do we have and what do we do best. And when you have defensive tackles, and I've said it before, it helped our defense so much last year. When you have defensive tackles that actually make tackles, which is what we have right now, it changes the way you call a game. It certainly helps you be in better shape on explosive plays on the back end. You don't have to do a whole lot to help those guys out because they're making tackles. So you got to go with that. You got to let those guys play and they're good. So you can't get too far away from the scheme of having those defensive tackles make plays because they're doing it and it works.
Over to the left, Tony Girdman, Buckeye Huddle.
Jim Ryan talked about the quarterback run being more of a thing with the offense this year. During the season, how much of when you're facing a team like that, how much does that impact your day-to-day throughout the week preparing for that?
Yeah, it's a ton. I think it changes everything you do on defense. You see it everywhere from the NFL on down. If you have a quarterback who can make plays with his feet, your scheme better be designed that to take that away and to account for it. So it changes the way you look at everything when you're game planning.
Thank you, Donovan. Over here to the right, Tim May, the Tim May podcast.
Yeah, Jim, you might have been interrupted when I asked Ryan about just, for example, Calvin Simpson Hunt, but the corners seem to be playing almost with a chip on their shoulder to a certain extent. I mean, Davis and Nick Benosin took today personally, it looked like, you know what I mean, because of some of the hype going into the game. But what do you see from that group in particular that buoys you going into this offseason?
Yeah, when you have corners that you can count on, again, it's just like having defensive tackles in the run game. When you have corners you can count on that are going to compete all the time, no matter what the situation is, and we've developed that. Again, it changes the way you call the entire game. I mean, you're able to leave those guys on an island. You're able to switch up coverages, and they know what they're doing, and they take great pride in it. So having those guys out there in the development, it's a big deal. It really is.
And his Hunt jumped into the picture a little bit more. I mean, obviously came in late last year.
Yeah, I mean, he did come in late, and he's one of those guys that just competes every day, doesn't say much. He's trying to live up to the standard of the other guys, and you see him coming along. You see him step by step coming along, and put him in a competitive atmosphere, see him step up. That's a great sign.
And final question for Coach Knowles, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
You mentioned C.J. Hicks a few minutes ago. Have you seen him take the strides you need to see this spring to trust him as a guy who could be a potential starter on this defense?
Yes. I mean, I think C.J. has shown that he has talent, and I think it's my job to put him in the best situations for him because he can be a force. He's much better when he's blitzing or he's directed because he's able to use his athletic ability. But he has certainly shown that he's going to be able to help this defense.
Coach, thank you very much for your time. All right, and we will bring offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Chip Kelly to the podium now. We'll open up the questions. Over to the left, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Hey, Chip. What are your just general impressions of the offense coming out of spring, especially at quarterback?
We'll look at all 15. So I think, this day is a big part of it, because it was the first time they ever got to play. Some of those guys ever got to play in front of a crowd. And it was an amazing crowd. You get 80,000 for a spring game. You could see some of the young guys kind of looking around like, wow, this is different than the indoor. But that's what they have to get ready to play in. So We got better from practice 1 to practice 15. It's still an evaluation through the whole process, but it's not something, and the players know too, that we're not making a decision walking off the field today saying, hey, this is the direction that we're going in. We'll be very authentic and look through everything and make sure that we get a really good feel for what it all looks like, and then who will best move this offense. That's what our decision is going to be based on.
Quarterback situation right now?
I do. I think we got a lot of guys there. That part's tough, I think, because there's guys that deserve reps, and they're all competing for it. So, sometimes you'd like to be, sometimes when you had a guy who was an initial starter, well, he's going to get the bulk of the reps to get him better. But they capitalized on it, and we really rolled them. If you were at some of our spring practices, you're watching all those guys rotate in, rotate out. And as we talk about all the time, the old adage is don't count your reps, make your reps count. And we'll put it all together and really come up with, which guy do we really feel is going to help us move this offensively.
Over to the far right, Bill Landis, the podcast, Kings of the North.
Hey, Chip. You said when we first talked to you that the basis of a lot of your success running the football is just kind of figuring out what your guys do best and then leading into that. Over 15 practices now, how good of a feel do you think you have for that? And then what did the next few months look like as you try to piece that all together?
Really good question. It's interesting because the one thing that I think sometimes makes it tough in an evaluation is what a good front we went against. So for 15 practices, those guys on the other side of the ball were a pain, Jack and JT and Tyleek and those guys. But I know come fall, there's not going to be anybody more happy that we have those guys on the defensive side of the ball because of what they can do. So I still think we'll have to really evaluate that, what we're good at, what we're not, what we got to get better at, and what we got to work on. But I think the work we got against such a quality defense was really key for us.
Over to the far left, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
So a year ago at this time, came out of the spring with still a lot of question marks about the offensive line. And even, I guess, last season came out with question marks. Have you seen that progress in the time that you've been here? And what's your confidence level that offensive line is going to allow this offense to do everything it wants to do this fall?
Yeah, I mean, I've been here a short amount of time, so I didn't know. I really don't have anything to compare it to, so I kind of tabula rasa, come in with a blank slate and just observe it. I think we're really athletic. I think Donnie and Seth and those guys inside are really smart and really intelligent. They allow you to be able to make adjustments in game. Just talking football with some of those guys, it's like, wow, these guys are wired the right way. And a lot of those guys have played a lot of football, so they can bank on their experience there. I think we've got about 4 guys that have played significant amount of snaps, and we got to make sure we can find out who the 5th guy is. But that's similar to where the quarterback spot is, I think. And I also think in the offensive line, you're not going to play a 16, 17-game season and just play with 5 guys. You really have to develop your depth there. There's going to be a number 2 center that's going to play a lot of football. There's going to be a number 2 guard, whether it's on either side of the ball. There's going to be a 3rd tackle. I think you're going to get tested, especially with this new playoff format. You really have to think that way. So, you're not looking for 5 starters. You're really looking for 10 starters because you're going to have to probably play 10 guys when you get through a 16, 17-game season.
Over to the right, Austin Ward, the podcast.
Chip, I think it was the first play of the game, the T formation, and then the reverse, spin move with Will Howard. What's the inspiration for that package and that sort of wrinkle with the quarterback?
Mr. Hayes. He has there's a looming figure around this whole program. We get to go to work every day in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. So it was good enough for Woody. We're going to steal it. We're going to do it. We ran some last year. I think we took 21 snaps at UCLA and T. Been a short yardage formation for us, and we've done some different things with it. But I think our players had a lot of fun, practicing that and doing some different things. So it's a small part of our offense. We will not be in the T 21 times in one game, but we may get it in some short yardage situations. And I think it's come back. There's a lot of schools right now that are starting to do that. It's really just you're trying to. You got a half a yard to get, you're trying to get your big guys in the game. And I think we used 3 tight ends and 2 running backs in our formation today with Packard being the fullback in that situation. So there's a lot of different things you can do in short yardage, but a little bit of a tribute to Coach Hayes and what he means to this program.
Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch, over to the left.
Chip, as you look back, now you've been here 2 months, 15 spring practices. Is there something you feel best about what you've been able to accomplish with this offense?
Well, I haven't accomplished anything because I didn't take a snap. But I think the most impressive thing since I've been here is how close this football team is. Some programs talk about a brotherhood. This is really a brotherhood. Our practices, as we talked about how good our defense is, they're highly competitive, but they're not combative. And those guys really work very, very well together, both the O-line and the D-line, the secondary and the receivers. The competition is the best. It's got to be the best there is in the country, and that makes you better. But I think sometimes competition, guys can lash out and it gets really combative, and then all of a sudden the fight breaks out and we're trying to accomplish and get football done. But I think the way these guys cooperate and work together as a group is a special bond, and I think you're going to need the closest team and the most connected teams are the ones that win.
Over to the right here, Andy Backstrom, Letterman Row.
Chip, obviously there's been a lot of talk about Jeremiah, but Emeka is the big returner in this group. He kind of reminded everyone what he can do today. What's it been like working with him, and what kind of weapon can he be for you guys?
Good point. And Emeka has reminded me in the other 14 practice sessions of what he can do. Special player, and JJ's a really talented player also. But, I think all of the whole group, like Carnell Tate did some really good things watching him this spring. And for all of them, I mentioned it with the offensive line. I came in with a blank slate. I had no opinions formed, not that, really just wide-eyed and just observe them. But, I think that wide receiver room is really special. And I think there's a bunch of guys in there. And again, when you have to play multiple games after the regular season is over, you're going to make sure you're going to need depth like that. And the fact that you feel a little bit comfortable right now that we got some guys there that can make some plays on the perimeter. And that really dictates how people are going to defend you. So you got a couple really good running backs, so are they going to load the box? Are you really going to load the box and leave those guys in one-on-one coverage? Well, then it's the quarterback's responsibility to decipher that and to get the ball to those guys. So, or do they elicit double coverage? They elicit double coverage, and now it's a little bit lighter box and you can run the ball. So having too many weapons is a good problem to have.
Second row left, Pat Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
Chip, we've talked a lot about kind of the quarterbacks maybe vying for the starting spot, but some of the younger guys, what have you seen from them? We got an opportunity to see more of them today than we probably have. What's your assessment of them as they kind of get into this?
I always am so impressed with young guys that enroll early and watching how they get acclimated and what they do. When you look at Julian and Air and JJ, they should be in the hot lunch line of their high school. And they're out here playing in front of 80,000 people. And they've really progressed when you watch them in meetings and listen to them, and they interpret, so basically the whole concept here is we throw them in the deep end and see if they can swim. We didn't baby anything. We don't put the install in with, hey, you guys are install. We're going to install this with the older players, and then you guys, go sit at the kiddie table, and we're just going to do the really simple things with you. They get it all, and the more they can digest, the more when you're in a room, when you're checking for understanding and asking questions, and they can spit back to you, the more confidence you have when they get in there with the plays that you can call for them. So. Those guys have been impressive. They're still learning. They were the guys today that were kind of looking around and saying, wow, there's like 80,000 people here, along with the offensive coordinator and the quarterback coach, because I was kind of looking around because I had actually never been in the stadium until yesterday when we had our 14th practice in there. So I played Ohio State once when I was at Oregon, but that was in the Rose Bowl, so I had never been actually in the stadium until yesterday. So I caught myself when I went into the stadium today looking around saying 80,000 for a spring game. That's impressive.
Got time for just a few more, folks. Over here to the right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
Given what you just said about throwing them into the deep end, what stood out the most to you about Julian's progression through 15 practices and where he is as you guys head out of spring?
Julian is a very fast processor. He really thinks very, very quickly on his feet. Like he makes really quick decisions. He doesn't stick on and reads. He can progress and he sees things really well for a young player, and not having been exposed to a lot of college defenses and especially what Jim does. Jim can make a young freshman quarterback cry with some of the stuff he does. But, I never saw that with Jules, and I that's been impressive, his ability to retain. And, him and JJ, the compliment I would say to him is, if you got here and you didn't know what class they were in, you wouldn't say that those guys were freshmen in terms of how they've picked things up. And sometimes freshmen act like freshmen, but the guys who are special, they don't act like freshmen. They act like they're football players. And those are two guys that are examples of that.
Far left, Cameron Teague Robinson, The Athletic.
Chip, you on the topic of freshmen, James Peoples and Sam got a lot of run in the second half.
Yeah.
You talk about how deep you need to be in this era of college football, but as you search for RB3, what did you see from them today, and what has their growth been like in this spring?
Yeah, James really flashed early for me, not knowing, again, kind of, let's just don't worry about what the background is, where they're from, who they are. Did this guy have this stars? This guy have that stars? They're all Buckeyes, and just how they do it. I think James has got really good feel and vision. He can hit things. I thought Sam did some really good things today. TC is another guy who really came along during the spring. And we're constantly talking in our staff meetings about depth. We're very cognizant of the fact that the playoff situation has changed. So you have to develop that depth. Used to be maybe have a pair and a spare is what everybody says, but I think you may have to have more than that. You're talking about 16, 17 games. You're really going to be tested that way. So I was really happy with how those young guys have come along here in the 15 training sessions that we've had.
Over here to the right, Tim May, the Tim May podcast.
Thank you, Jerry.
You have your own podcast?
Yeah.
Like these guys all had like a name next to theirs. Yours
mine's
is your
the Tim
name.
May Show. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
you're
pretty
welcome
cool.
anytime, Chip.
You must have some juice if you got your name in your podcast.
Definitely.
Okay.
By the way,
I like it.
It's not just the lunch line; it's the hot lunch line. That's what I like.
Yeah, it's a hot lunch line.
Yeah. Just two quickies. Number one, do you feel compelled to let these quarterbacks know where they stand? It's coming up Tuesday. You know what I mean? Where does that go? I mean, in your mind?
Yeah, we'll sit down as a staff and visit and meet on it. And then Ryan, he does an unbelievable job of, I think all our players understand where they fit and what the picture is, and we'll give them our assessment. This isn't, we're not going to come back, but we do it after every day. They know where they stood after practice 1, after 2, after 3, after 4. We grade everything. They're getting constant feedback in terms of where we are. And then after 15, which we had today, but we can't do it unless you watch the film and can really look at the things, because you may see something, but you're on the sideline. Why did he make that decision? Well, I couldn't really see the field safety from where he was. Okay, now I understand why he made that decision. So, but we'll have meetings with all our players, and that's always been the method. So this week during, between Monday through Friday, we're all scheduled. No one's going on the road to recruiting until after that, but we'll all have player meetings at every position. Offensive line, defensive line, linebacker, safeties, everybody's going to sit down with their position coaches and know where they fit and where we see them.
But do you feel a pressure with the transfer portal looming? I mean, you've been a head coach for a long time. I mean, is that on your mind that Tuesday?
Yeah, I think we're all aware of it. I'm 100%, and I don't think it's pressure, but I think you just open lines of communication, and everybody knows, what your evaluation was through the training sessions that we have.
Guys, we got real quick last two questions. Dan Hope and then Rob Aller.
Feel like you need to have a starting quarterback named by, and what are the biggest things you're going to be looking for between now and then in determining who that guy's going to be?
Well, between now and whatever then is, we're not allowed as coaches to go back out and practice with them. In college football, you get 15 training sessions in the off season, and then they'll go back to working with Mick in the weight room and getting bigger, getting faster, getting stronger. They'll have organized activities themselves, and they do a really good job of that. But once there's a football out, like, we're not allowed to be there to evaluate and even assess. So they're really, from a football standpoint, are on their own until August. So you always want to do it earlier. But I also believe every time I've been involved in this is that it kind of happens organically and authentically, because the players know. And if you say, hey, we decided we're going to be with Joe, and they all think it's Tim, they know. They're in the locker room with him every day. Players understand, who they feel is the guy, and most of the time, the decision is very obvious. When you just say, "Hey, this is where we are with it," But there's that timetable thing. I can't give you an exact timetable on that. So,
Rob,
Chip, you talked about Julian, but typically in your experience, you've done it again, like Tim said, a long time. How long does it take for the game to slow down for a young QB?
I think it depends on the individual. I've had some kids where early, you were like, wow. Marcus Mariota was like that. I remember vividly second practice, and he got to the fifth read in the progression and threw it out here, and it was a big game. And I asked him why. I do that all. I asked why, because I just want to understand it. And I said, why did you do that? And he goes, I don't know what we call that defense, but there was like a lot of guys over there, and it didn't seem like there was anybody over there. But for him to process it that fast, and he was right. And he came back the other day, and that was cover 6 the other day, Coach. I learned what you guys call the coverages, but it all happens differently. I've got guys that for 2 years seem like they're just, they're really struggling, and then the light bulb goes off, and you go, whoa, like they got it. So everybody has different learning styles. Our job in the evaluation process is to identify those learning styles. So, are they a cognitive learner? Are they an auditory learner? Do they learn by feel? Is it more a feel guy, a more film guy? It's all different. And I think we have to keep poking and prodding. And for us as coaches, that's the challenge too, is what is their best learning style and how can we convey it? Because education basically is just a transportation of knowledge. But it really doesn't matter what I know or what Ryan knows. It matters what they know. So that's always kind of what we're working on and studying and thinking about, and kind of where we are and how much can they handle, and then how much is too much, because this may be a great play. I agree 100%. But if he doesn't feel it's a good play, then why is it in? You know what I mean? And that's this whole feeling out process that they're learning us and we're learning them. So
offenses have identities. So do coaches, really.
Mm-hmm.
Running quarterbacks, is that
Mhm.
something you've always sort of leaned toward, or is it year by year, case by case? What advantages do you like about, because all your guys can run a little bit?
Yeah, I think a running quarterback causes problems for a defense. So when plays break down, the unscheduled plays, if you just go back to the recent Super Bowl, on that last drive, the 2 big plays were Mahomes' run. But Patrick Mahomes is not a runner. Andy's not calling design quarterback runs for Pat. But when the defense matches up and plays 2-man and turns their back to the quarterback, well, maybe the best decision is to take off. The second one he took off, I'm like, he may score. A lot of guys go and they want a hook slide, and there's times where you have to understand, if you do have a running quarterback, and we talk about the best ability is availability. You're not lowering your shoulder and taking people on, but we are always looking for quarterbacks that have the ability to run. We're not looking for running backs that can throw. So you're not going to see us 20 times a game we're running the quarterback. There are people that run it offensive styles and are really successful with it, but with this group we have right now, that's not. Now they can hurt you with the feet. Will did it when he was at K-State. Obviously Devin took off a couple times today. Air took off a couple times today. Lincoln's a really, really good athlete. Julian can run, but we're not calling design quarterback runs. You're not going to see a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Hayes and the legacy that he left here. The straight T is about as far as we go. We are not going single wing. So we are not going to snap it and run quarterback ISO and quarterback power. So, but it's another weapon, and if it also keeps defenses honest. If your defensive end is going to continue to bend, then the quarterback pulls it and he's on the edge and he's gaining first downs. Well, then the defensive end has to stay outside and contain the quarterback. Well, then we can run the ball up and hand the ball off. Sometimes in our running game, our quarterback really is a blocker. He's responsible for a defender. If the defender is cheating and fitting in on the run, well, then his responsibility is to make the defense be honest. And that's really, Air did that a couple times today. And we had a block, the safety was sticking his face in there. So Air took off around the edge. What happens the next play? The defense is wider. Then what do we get to do? We get a chance to hand the ball off to the running back.
Great. Coach, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being a Buckeye.
All right, thanks.
Great job. Okay. Thank you. I just got to go.
All right, so we have heard from head coach Ryan Day, defensive coordinator Jim Knowles, offensive coordinator Chip Kelly. And Michael, I think one of the things that Ryan Day said that really stood out to me is there are so many different things that you could say that Ohio State is really great at. I think what are you most impressed with, or whatever, what's the biggest takeaway from spring practice? You could say athleticism, you could say so many different things, and what he said was experience. We got a lot of guys who have played a lot of football, and I guess I didn't think about it that way, but he's right. There are a ton of guys that are coming back that just have years and years and years and hundreds of snaps under their belt. That's going to be a big key at the early start of the season when you are breaking in either a quarterback who hasn't played a whole lot in Devin Brown, or breaking in a new guy in Will Howard that is, getting acclimated to a new system, a new teammate base. That experience is going to be important.
Yeah. And I think the experience is especially prevalent on the defensive side of the ball. You think about JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, Denzel Burke, Cody Simon, Lathan Ransom will be back. Those guys have all been playing meaningful snaps since 2021. Those guys have a lot of experience under their belts, so that's a very experienced defense. Offensively, some of the more experienced guys are transfers, actually. I mean, you think about Will Howard, you think about Seth McLaughlin, Quinshon Judkins, but there's still a lot of experience from returning guys as well. I mean, that's one of the key things to this team. It's not just about bringing new transfers every cycle. Like, a lot of this NIL money was spent to keep guys here, and I think it was money well spent because experience is pretty much so much more important than a lot of people might realize.
Yeah, especially when you get into the early stages there of the season, where the first couple 3 or 4 games every year, it's, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, we're not that good. Where if you can come into a season where you're not necessarily breaking in an entire defensive line, defensive backfield, it gets you one. It helps you in spring practice. You can get kind of an edge on what you want to do and the implementation process, but then also you can kind of hit the ground running rather than get that feeling out process the first couple of weeks.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And especially on defense, like I said, this team is just so experienced. We're going into the 3rd year of Knowles' system now, so that helps as well.
No, absolutely. And I think you saw kind of that be a benefit today of guys being in that 3rd year where they're not thinking about, okay, what does that terminology mean? Where should I line up? It was it looked like they had been empowered to, hey, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to put our playmakers in positions to make plays. And I think you saw that a couple of different times today.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So when you take a look offensively, Ryan Day talked about, and Chip Kelly did too, where you're not going to just be relying upon the 5 offensive linemen that we might decide to start. We're going to need more than that. And it was clear that Ryan Day was not really thrilled with the right side of the offensive line. We talked about it earlier. Is there a get rich quick fix to this that seems natural to you, that all they got to do is X, Y, Z and that right side is fixed?
Well, sometimes it's more about the Jimmies and Joes and the X's and O's. If there's a guy in the portal, like realistically, I mean, in a sense, yes, if you can find the right guy in the portal, that kind of does fix all those problems. Josh Fryer is repped at guard too. He played a lot of guard in 2022 against Michigan because Matt Jones was hurt. I think moving Josh Fryer inside, it could be more natural for him. And otherwise, aside from that, I mean, I think even if you don't find a tackle in the portal, if you find a guard to put there and you leave Josh Fryer at tackle, I still think that's an upgrade. And like Chip Kelly said, I mean, depth is huge in the O-line. As poor as the offensive line performance was against Missouri, they were only missing one guy out that game. It was just Carson Hinsman. And you saw just having to go one guy deep into their bench, how discombobulated they looked.
And obviously that doesn't instill a whole lot of confidence for the 2024 season. But I think one, you get a look at what the current iteration of Ohio State looks like. The transfer portal opening up next week is going to change a lot of things, both guys that are currently here that might not be here, but then also I think the offensive line might be one of those spots that is ripe for hey, we need to, that's where we need to be looking for some help and reinforcements going into fall camp, that if we don't feel great about the 5 or the best 5, or whether we have the right 5 in the right spots, that's a place that you can make a quick upgrade, correct?
Yeah. I mean, if the right guy's there, of course. And even if someone is there who's not maybe starter quality yet, but could be in the future, I say add the depth. Because again, we saw what happened when we had to go one person into our bench against Missouri, and it didn't look pretty.
And I think that offensive line is just so important because you've got such skilled playmakers at running back, at wide receiver, at tight end, that if you get the ability to run the football, which obviously Chip Kelly is, that's what we're going to run the football innovatively, but we want to run the football, having that solid offensive line. There's so many things that are keyed on that the quarterback play relies on the offensive line, the running game, the passing game, where you've got these great talented wide receivers, but if you don't got time to get them the ball, it doesn't really matter.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you said it. I mean, without it's just like having all these talented receivers. You don't have the quarterback to get them the ball. It doesn't matter. The offensive line doesn't get the quarterback time. It doesn't matter. And, you know, a running back can only do so much by themselves. Granted, there are two very, very talented backs on this roster. But, and actually on this topic, though, I didn't think the run blocking looked that bad today. The pass protection was concerning at times, but on the pure run blocking standpoint, I actually was perfectly fine with what I saw. And especially when you take in mind the fact that they're blocking Tyleik Williams and JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. They're not blocking, you know, a bunch of first-year starters.
I think there was a point in the first quarter when they were still kind of just thudding it up that TreVeyon Henderson kind of had this reaction of like, in a real game, I'm not down right there. Like in a real game, that is not a 5-yard gain.
Yeah,
that is an 18-yard game. And I think that probably plays into our perception of that run game might be a little different if we're pulling guys to the ground because, you know, somebody gets close to TreVeyon Henderson. It's all right. Whistle's blown. That's a 5-yard gain rather than he busts a tackle and it's a 12 or 13-yard game. So I think you're right that the run block and I think when they wanted to line up and run the football, I think you're right that it wasn't maybe as bad as maybe we perceived it. But at the same time, when Ryan Day says, no, I'm not happy with the way that right side of the line has played throughout the day, there's a difference between like the head coach having a really super high standard because on, I think the touchdown throw on Fox, he was mic'd up and they're like, did he get the ball out fast enough? No. Like he's always looking for perfection rather than good enough. And I think that there's a distinction there from a fan's perspective of when the head coach says like, no, that's not good enough. There's a difference between not good enough and unacceptable, or we need to make changes, or we're going to get beat because of this one specific area.
Right. No, I absolutely agree. But
when you take a look at the wide receivers coming into the spring game, Jeremiah Smith had gotten a lot of publicity, and justifiably so. It certainly appears as if they really want him involved early, or at least in the spring game, they were really cognizant of trying to get him the football in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the kid's talented. I watched him play when he was in high school, just on TV, had a few nationally televised games. And, you know, he was playing in South Florida. That's the best high school football competition in the country. He wasn't just playing, but so even then you could just tell how good he was going to be. And they definitely tried to throw some of those 50-50 balls. A couple of them could have been thrown a little bit better perhaps. But, you know, it's important to remember too, I mean, he's going up against some really good corners. Between Igbinosa and Burke, and then even Jermaine Matthews and Simpson Hunt hasn't gotten as many live game reps, but the coaches seem to be very high on him. So Jeremiah Smith, what he's been able to do based on what these leaked videos we've seen is quite impressive. But I'd say the corners held their own today.
And you obviously want it to be somewhat borderline, but the competition between the wide receivers and cornerbacks was definitively on display today. That there was the play where they threw a 50-50 ball up to Jeremiah Smith, where I forget, it might have been Jermaine Matthews who was on the coverage, that was really animated after the play, after it was an incompletion, where those guys aren't just, you know, buddy, that they want to win that rep just as much as the young buck does.
Right. Oh, absolutely. It's great for both sides of the ball, obviously, to have that competition and practice every day. And again, I'm impressed with both the receivers and the defensive backs.
All right, so that'll do it for the first hour of the post-game huddle. We'll bring in the real stars of the show. We got Tom Moore and Tony Gerdeman standing by in Columbus to bring you the Buckeye Weekly podcast.
Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Michael, for getting us to this point. Appreciate you guys helping out. And I'll welcome everybody to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Moore. Tom, how's it going?
I'm concerned that people may feel that we have oversold the Jeremiah Smith experience, and elements of the offense on the whole that felt like one of the most spring games I can remember in both good and bad ways.
You say that, but those 2 catches for 12 yards were arguably the best 12 yards I've ever seen in a spring game. But yeah, and we said that before the game. Like hopefully you get to see what everybody has seen. And of course, that didn't happen. Again, not our fault. That's Jeremiah Smith's fault. Also the fault of the quarterbacks, Tom. It was a little windy. There were some underthrown passes there, which has been an issue throughout the spring throwing to him that we've seen, but he still was able to make those catches. Like the throw into the end zone today with Calvin Simpson Hunt or somebody on him. Like he had no chance at catching that because it never got to him. So he, unfortunate for everybody out there, but I'm sure they talked about him quite a bit on the show.
I would certainly assume that they did, and this is one of the things where it's like, I promise, like we've seen it, we know, everyone is in agreement.
Yeah.
Sasquatch is real, I promise. Just because he didn't see him today,
there's too many witnesses out there for it not to be real.
Yes, we will all get to go squatching again together during the fall, but it was, this was a game where you saw flashes from certain guys, but if people were coming in thinking we're going to come out of the spring game and everyone's going to know who the starting quarterback is, the stats we have, I think, are just through the first 3 quarters. But the 4 quarterbacks who played the most threw for 77, 77, 71, and 66 yards. So which of those was and the only touchdown was to a walk-on wide receiver against, I think, the number 3 defense. So which of those was the standout performance to you?
Oh, I think they all stood out equally. But no, I think the one thing we did learn, and Ryan Day said there was a separation going on Wednesday, but he didn't say what that separation was. I think the fact that Will Howard and Devin Brown did not play in the second half tells you what the separation is, and it's what we suspected. So those 2, and then it's the other 3. And among those other 3, it's Lincoln Keenels and Julian Sayin. And then behind them is Aaron Nolan. Aaron Nolan, I thought, honestly, this is the best I've seen him look in the few times we've got to see him this spring. But there's definitely a separation, and you saw each of those other 3 quarterbacks, each of those 3 younger quarterbacks have their struggles. I think, did they each throw an interception in this game?
I think there were a total of 4 interceptions, I believe.
I don't know that Nolan threw an interception. Oh, he threw the interception at the end of the game. So the turnovers were there. The older guys did much better. And of course, go ahead and throw your questions, throw your super chats. We'll get to them.
Mark Farino says, didn't see a big difference between Sand and Nolan. Neither are ready yet. I mean, neither are ready yet. I would agree. I think this one day, we talked about this a little bit before the game. This is the only time that a lot of people get a chance to see. So it's like, well, this must be what it always looks like. And no, that's not really what it's always looked like. And the fact that the coaches, there were 3 to 4 guys rolling in the first half. And I don't think we saw Aaron Nolan in the first half. So that kind of tells you what the coaches have probably been seeing for the previous 14 practices. And that certainly, I think, aligns with what we've seen during the more limited viewings that we've gotten. I think there's talent there on all 5 of those guys are talented quarterbacks. I don't think they're coming out of spring going, we have, this is too close because we have multiple guys who are extremely, extremely excellent and ready to go and 100% faith in these guys. I think it's still a little bit of a work in progress with pretty much all of them.
I would ask everybody out there to name a freshman quarterback that was, quote, ready in the spring at any point after 15 practices. It's not going to happen. It doesn't happen. It has never happened at Ohio State since maybe back in Earl Bruce's day when there was not a separation between throwing the ball and handing it off because it was all the same. So the modern football, it's just, you're not going to have that. And you can be advanced for a freshman, but you're still very much a true freshman, as we saw with Julian Sayin and Aaron Nolan both today.
And, I think it's just me. Tim says you don't have to be quote unquote ready if you can just run. That takes me back to the 2008 USC game with Terrell Pryor, where they were down 1,000,000-3, and it's like, well, we're just going to throw in Terrell Pryor, and he's going to just make stuff happen. And he could run, and he picked up a first down or 2, and it was like, wow, look at him. And then USC adjusted, and then that stopped working. So that works until it doesn't. And in fairness to this offense, they were going up against one of, if not the best defenses in the country today.
Yeah, and I throw Terrell Pryor against Penn State in 2008 when he could run, but they still lost that game because there was couldn't pick up the first down there. Lincoln Keenels could run last year. He wasn't ready against Missouri, and so you saw the results of that. So, and eventually that gets worn down. I remember one of Charlie Weiss's was it 2007 or 2006 or 7 when he was starting Demetrius Jones, and he thought he was so brilliant because he's like, we're going to run the ball with the quarterback, and that's what they did. They didn't have a quarterback they could throw, and they lost 33-3 to Georgia Tech because you need to be able to do something else unless you have somebody that is incredibly dynamic. Yeah. Even Jalen Milroe, eventually Alabama got stopped because they couldn't throw the ball.
Yeah. It's a work in progress for sure with the offense, with the quarterbacks, with the offensive line. I mean, the offensive line, the center position. We saw that at the start, it was, I think yesterday we saw Carson Hinsman with the ones, and then it was Seth McLaughlin starting out at center. I don't remember. I was not in a great spot to see things with.
You're only shooting photos. I couldn't see anything.
Well, the spring game is great because you have the normal ref butt in your way, but there's also half the time there's just a bunch of coaches and like Fox camera people just standing in the middle of the field. So there's even more bodies to look through. There's even more bodies to look through than normal. So I was constantly trying to find a clear lane to see things. I don't remember seeing a bunch of bad snaps. I mean, were the snaps okay for the most part?
A couple low ones, said Kevin. There was a fumbled handoff, but that's not on the center. But I mean, overall, you could probably expect some iffy snaps when you're in there with the first drive, but you're not in there in the second drive or third drive, and you're switching back and forth because I think Seth McLaughlin started the game today, as you said, and then the next one of the few possessions after that, you had Carson Hinsman out there at center. So they're rotating and rolling in there. So I'm not going to get worked up about something like that right now. Wait until they do it against Akron or whomever.
Yeah, I think I'm coming out of the spring, and the coaching staff they don't want to say anything about anything right now. They want to go watch the film. They want to go evaluate all 15 practices. I'm trying to decide if I'm coming out of spring feeling more optimistic, less optimistic, or about as optimistic about this team, just on the whole, as I was expecting to at the beginning of spring. I think the quarterback position, I was, sort of thinking that someone might sort of separate themselves one way or another. I don't think that that's really happened. There's certainly areas where you're more optimistic. I mean, Jeremiah Smith, the ceiling has only gone up, regardless of what the numbers were on Saturday. I think the offensive line, I'm feeling like they're probably in pretty decent shape there for the most part. I think the defense, you're feeling probably pretty optimistic on the whole with the defense. I just, what do you think? Are you coming out of the spring feeling like, the expected number of wins for this team has ticked up by, a tenth of a win, 2/10 of a win, or half of a win or something from where you were at the beginning of the spring? Or do you think it's kind of the same? I don't think there's a strong case to be made to be less optimistic on the whole.
No, I'm the same because you go into this knowing not to put too much stock in a spring game. So, when the head coach is doing interviews for half of the time on television, it's like, clearly this is not the most important thing on his radar this practice today. So I'm not going to get too worried by the fact that the defense, Tom, gave up 190 yards rushing through 3 quarters. I mean,
they did.
Now they do get all of the rushing yards against them for both teams.
Yeah.
But I think the running game aspect I thought was good, and when they're blowing things dead with just a touch, the numbers are going to be less than what they would normally be. But also the defense is not as violent towards the running game. But getting the quarterbacks involved, I think everybody saw that that's going to be something they do this year, and it's going to make them more effective. You've seen some of the lot of like the inside running that Chip Kelly has brought some misdirection as well. And so I think there's a lot of interesting things that's going on that will happen with this running game to make it a better running game than last year, and should be a better running game than it's been the past 3 years. Now, can they match the yards per carry that they had under CJ Stroud? If they can do that, while running as much as they do, you're going to lead the Big Ten in rushing by 30, 40 yards like they did in 19 and 20.
And Mika Hanna says James Peoples, Sam Williams-Dixon looked very impressive. Sam Williams-Dixon was, I think, maybe one of the more impressive players. Just, and he's out there and he's going against the 2s and the 3s, so this is not saying he's in any danger of stealing a bunch of carries from Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson, but that you see these guys come out in the third and fourth quarter of these games, and sometimes you see like, aha, like now you see what this coaching staff saw in them. He is probably play a little against Akron and play a little against a couple other games, probably take a redshirt year kind of guy, and then we'll see you in 2025. But watching that, it was kind of we have just not seen. You don't get to watch a lot of running during just a typical practice. So that was the first time, and that I thought like, aha, there it is. James Peoples, I think, looked pretty impressive as well.
Yeah, Peoples has looked good every time we've seen him. This was the first tackling of the spring, so this is the first time the running backs were dealing with that as well. So just watching that was interesting, and waiting until the second quarter when that tackling began.
Yeah.
But Sam Williams-Dixon can play the first 4 games or 3 of the first 4, and then come back later in the postseason and still get his minutes, get his reps, and still keep his red shirt. So TC Caffey, Chip Kelly, and everybody keeps talking well of him as that 5th guy. We'll see if they go into the portal as expected to bring in bodies, because as Chip Kelly said, the pair and despair is no longer. You need more than that. They've needed a pair and despair the last few years here at Ohio State. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a rhyme, a trio, and something.
We'll work on that. Joe J says, whose idea was it come out and play flag football? Unacceptable.
That's been that way for a decade.
Every spring game in the country, because there was the year, and this is the cautionary tale of Ohio State spring games, is the year that Mike Tomczak broke his leg in the spring game under Earl Bruce, and it really screwed up that season. They are very conscious of what they call exposures, and basically the number of times you're getting hit during the course of a season, and the number of times you get hit during the course of a year. That is a very big thing. That is something that is not just Ohio State, that's conference wide and nationally in terms of college football, and just trying to get there's been a lot of research about the long-term damage that can be done in terms of just the repetitive hits, the repetitive hits to the head, all of that stuff. They factor all of that in, and this is what spring games have looked like for a long time. They have especially when the ones are in, they don't, Ryan Day said on Friday or Thursday, they don't want Trevion Henderson getting hit. Like, what is the point of hitting Trevion Henderson? Trevion Henderson knows what it's like to get hit in college. Quinshon Judkins knows what it's to get hit in college. The quarterbacks, there's no sense in having a quarterback getting absolutely blown up. There were a couple times when Edric Houston, Jason Moore, guys were coming like behind. I think Jack Sawyer had one early where guys were coming blindside, and it was like, boy, that could have been a real violent collision. Which what do you accomplish by having a quarterback take a hit like that? Nothing really. There's nothing on the line. You're not playing for anything. It is save those hits for when you need them, because you're going to be taking more hits this season because you're going to be playing more games than you have in the past.
Yeah, and it seems like people forget every year when the spring game comes that there's no tackling early on, or that it's entertaining throughout the entire game. Like, these are things you forget leading up to it, and so it's been that way for a very long time, and it's going to continue to be that way, especially now with more games.
So people are talking about Cam Ward, and
What did Cam Ward do?
Well, no, just our Charles says our quarterback average, you should have paid for Cam Ward. I mean, what has Cam Ward done yet? I mean, he went to Miami, which is where football careers go to die. So I'm going to I'm going to be short the Cam Ward experience this year, and we'll see if I beat the market there.
The quarterbacks. Will Howard 9 of 13, Devin Brown 5 of 7. I'm not concerned yet, but it's like I don't think they were any different than what we've expected, or it's not like we've touted them as Heisman contenders or anything like that. They're kind of known quantities a little bit, and Devin Brown being the known quantity in that.
Right. I don't know that there is a known quantity, and that's Devin Brown's been around the longest, but Devin Brown has not been able to stay healthy, so therefore you haven't seen the reps, you haven't seen the production on the field really, and he has had moments this spring. Will Howard has had moments this spring. Julian Sayin, Lincoln Keenholz, Aaron Nolan had moments on Saturday. They have recruited a ton of very talented players. It is, this is the really boring coach speak answer. But whenever you ask, coaches, what do you have to get better at? And this is true of defensive linemen, offensive linemen, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, you name it, punters. What do you have to get better at? Got to be consistent. That's, if you come to play football at Ohio State, you are one of the best football players in the country. You can obviously do cool things. You've got to be able to do them all the time. You've got to be able to make the cool stuff look routine. And I think there's just consistency is a little bit of a work in progress with some of these guys.
Yeah, and again, it's spring, so consistency is going to be an issue, and they're still mostly doing individual stuff in terms of that's what they're working on right now, and installing the offense here and there, and you'll get more and more of that in fall camp. But this is just incremental stuff, and Jay Blake, we're simply getting a taste of what's to come. Let's not be quick to judge just yet. I don't know, sir, if you are aware, but this is the internet, and this is an immediate reaction show to something that we just watched. So that's kind of, we call this an instant reaction, but could you also call it a quick judgment, the same thing. But again, it's one of 15 practices, and I don't know that anybody looked bad that you need to look great or look good this season. So I don't know that there's any reason to panic. And again, I will cite the Justin Fields 2019 spring game, 4 of 13, I believe. So
and the one completion that really saved his day and made it look even slightly good was like 98 yards to Ben Victor against a walk-on corner. So you came out of that game going, well, if you take out the one play against the walk-on, which is obviously not going to be representative, he was 3 of 12 for 30 yards. And that was there's a Mets podcast I like that has what they call a Panic City meter, and it's like 1 to 5, and 5 is it's Panic City, baby. If he had been 3 of 12 for 30 yards coming out of that spring game, everyone would have been running around like their pets' heads were falling off. And then he came out and was incredible that year, finished 41 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and got him to the Fiesta Bowl, and probably should have been playing for the national championship. And it's the spring game. You can't read too much into it. And this is the lesson, we tell you every year. And as you said, everyone sort of forgets. Let's see, just going through here. Jay Blake says, did Air even play against the ones? I don't know that he did. Because he was in in this, I think just in the second half, and they had, elements of the ones out there. They had CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles were out there in the final minutes of the game. So yeah, he played against probably some of the ones, but it wasn't Jack Sawyer or JT Tuimoloau. You had Kenyatta Jackson out there at times towards the end, and Jermaine Matthews, I think, was out there kind of towards the end. So you're playing against pieces of the ones, or guys who could potentially be with the ones at points this year, but was not against the ones, official ones.
And there are going to be a lot of guys that are with the ones throughout the game this year. But yeah, no, it was all 2s and 3s for him, as you would expect, playing into the second half of an Ohio State spring game. Now, I will say, Devin Brown and Will Howard combined for 14 of 20 in the first half, 143 yards and 20 some yards rushing. So like, if that's a game's worth of stats, you double that or whatever, I think you're okay with that kind of 240 yards passing, and they're going to run the ball more with quarterbacks. So an incompletion on second down can just as easily become a pickup on third down with the leg. So I didn't see anything today that makes me more concerned or think like they need to get back into that portal.
Yeah, no, I think there's plenty of talent there, and they don't need, with as talented as this roster is on the whole, you don't need the absolutely transcendent quarterback. If you could pull Cam Newton out of the portal, like that would be great, and I would recommend that you do that if 2010 Cam Newton is somehow becomes available to you. But they don't, this is, you look at the talent around Cam Newton on that Auburn team, and it was like Cam Newton and Nick Fairley, and I literally don't know if anyone else from that team got drafted. And this Ohio State team is so deep in so many different areas that you don't need Cam Newton. You need the quarterback who comes in, and he might need to win you one game at some point, but Cam Newton had to win them every single game that season. It was like, well, run the, push the Cam Newton win button. And that was the play. And that's not what this Ohio State team needs. They just need to find someone who's going to be consistent and be able to execute and do all the boring crap that coaches talk about all the time.
Be the point guard, be the Mike Conley of the offense, and just distribute the ball and let Emeka Egbuka go stab it with one hand on the sideline and remind people that he still exists, and let your running backs go. Travion Henderson had some nice moves, quickness. Him and Quinshon Judkins. I can't wait to see them actually be able to play live, because I'm sure they're getting tired of this in terms of you run up the middle and you're touched and now you're down, and you want to do more.
Well, I remember Travion Henderson when he got to Ohio State talking about the fact that he hadn't been hit in like 2 years because they didn't hit during spring, and he didn't play because Virginia didn't have football in the fall of 2020 in his final year as a high school player. So he came in and he was like, I cannot wait to get hit. And I'm sure he's probably he's probably older and wiser now, so he might not be looking forward to it quite as much, but I'm sure there's still a little bit of that in there. Just thinking through the other elements of the game, other guys who maybe stood out. I mean, I think to me, one of the young guys, like the true freshman, and this is someone who you might have mentioned his name, like in this specific context on the pregame show.
I did.
Edric Houston. Edric Houston was, it wasn't up against the ones, but he was impactful. You saw him. Jason Moore had one at one point. Edric Houston had at least one sack, maybe got in there and had a TFL or something at one point as well. He was of the, the young guys. It was kind of, let's see, he's got 4 tackles, 3 solo, one sack. That was like, okay, like that's another guy who I'm not expecting him to be in the too deep this year, but you can see it. It's going to be there eventually.
Yeah, and Mitchell Melton had a good game, and he's the number 5 defensive end. Edric Houston fighting to be that number 6 and pushing to be maybe more. But on his sack, I believe I watched him just push Zen Mahalski like backwards and then go get the sack. And I wanted to see replay, but they went to an interview with like Urban Meyer instead. So I missed, didn't get to see that.
What did Urban have to say?
I don't know. I was watching, I had it muted. But yeah, that was an impressive play, and I'll be interested to see what else he did. I don't know. Are you planning on rewatching this?
Me?
Yeah.
Am I planning on rewatching it? I don't know. I've got a pretty busy weekend. Yeah, I don't know.
With what?
Maybe. I don't know.
Dishes?
Home Depot? Not sure.
Home Depot.
Yeah.
Sitting in traffic?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I never feel like you learn as much from these games as you go in thinking you're going to, because it's just you have to go back. If you want to learn something from this, you have to go back and rewatch and like chart, okay, which quarterback was in with the first team offense, the second team offense, the third team offense. Were they going up against the first team defense, the second team defense? Was it the first team offensive line but going against the second team, like
down a distance?
Yeah, the only touchdown pass of the day was thrown with the, I think by Devin Brown, by I think with the second team or third team offense against the third team defense. And so what are we to learn from that? Like what's the big takeaway from
That-
my walk-ons beat your walk-ons?
Well, it's Devin Brown beating you with your players and that sort of thing where Devin Brown is clearly the best quarterback because he marched down the field with some walk-ons. But as you said, because I believe that touchdown pass was against Cedric Hawkins, third team free safety. So, it was way down the depth chart there. Do we have questions that
we do have some questions. We can.
I also loaded that audio for you.
Oh, Denzel Burke?
In the Buckeyes Weekly page of it.
Okay. Do you
I did
want
not-
to punch that up?
I can punch it.
Yeah. So let's go real quick. You got to hear a bunch from Ryan Day and Jim Knowles and Chip Kelly earlier. I got an interview with Denzel Burke that we'll play for you right now.
Yeah, he's a really good quarterback. He's young still, but the way he slings it off his hand, he's really comfortable in the pocket. All through spring ball, like I feel like he's made a lot of great plays, and we're really excited about him.
You talked coming out of last season, needing more turnovers, one interception. Obviously today's a scrimmage, but there's 3 I think out there. How's that been in practice? Is this a reflection of what you guys have done?
It's definitely a reflection of what we've been doing all spring. Like I said, I get the real highlight clips, throughout the spring, but we've been dominant.
What do you think it is that's allowed you guys to maybe flip that switch in terms of creative takeaways?
Really just Coach Knowles putting us in great positions to turn the ball over, moving guys around, different looks, different adjustments, and Coach Knowles has really done a great job of putting his trust in us, and we have our full trust in him.
Does this feel like the deepest cornerback unit you've had since you've been here?
Yes, and probably the best room unit I've had since I've been here. Camaraderie is good. We're tight. We do everything together. And, sky's the limit. And my job is just continue to bring the younger guys up and show them what it is and what it means to be on the field and represent BIA.
How do you feel like you've done in terms of being a leader this spring?
I've done a great job, especially my past 2 years. Always been a quiet guy, but I feel like this year I took another step into this leadership role and just bringing guys energy every day, lifting them up, teaching them some things, and showing them how to be a pro.
Who are some of the other guys you've seen step up around you in those leadership roles?
Davison, Igbendosin, Jordan Hancock, Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom, Cody Simon, the D lineman, everybody, man. It's awesome.
You mentioned Caleb. What was his growth like first coming in to now the end of the spring?
I feel like Caleb, it's Caleb Downs, man. We got him for a reason. He was a freshman All-American for a reason. And he's with us for a reason. And, he's a pro, he's a leader. He's helping the younger guys, too. And he's going to help us win games this year.
This time last year, we were talking a lot about just the corners taking that next step. Ryan just said he was the deepest corner, you just mentioned it. When do you think you saw that depth from guys like Calvin and even obviously Knowles just came in here? So when you see that depth kind of take that jump?
Really just spring ball, just be able to, my reps have gone limited, so I have a chance to be able to see the young guys and how they move and what they're doing. And really excited that we have Aaron Scott, we have Miles, Bryce Weston getting many reps, but the fall camp we should be able to see what he's about. Who am I missing? That's it. But I'm excited, Calvin, and I'm excited to see what they do and how they continue to develop.
How does that push you guys?
All right, folks, we're going to bring Coach Jim Knowles
really
up here,
just
and
being
then
able
we'll
to
have,
knowing that we
Jim
can
Kelly.
rely on them whenever somebody goes down, and when they go in there, they're going to do what they got to
To the
do.
right, Dylan Davis, Delaware Gazette.
All good. Thanks, guys.
Thought overall it was a pretty good day by the Ohio State secondary. I think they came into it with a little bit of
Je ne sais quoi.
I don't know what that means. Attitude
Means French.
But because social media has been showing all of these plays that the receivers and Jeremiah Smith has been making on the corners, and it sure seemed like they were intent on not letting that happen today with him or anybody else, and they were pretty emphatic with their reactions to knocking passes away or incomplete passes or passes that were out of the back of the end zone that they somehow celebrated making the play on. But clearly they thought they had a really good day, and that is from top down. Aaron Scott dropped an interception that killed him. He dropped down to the ground on that one. But you saw, I'm talking about him all spring long. Jalen McClain comes in and gets a play, makes a play there, and is robbed of a pick six because he got touched by Carson Hinsman, and we know that means you're down. But overall, I thought a lot of these guys looked pretty good in the secondary.
Yeah, it was I mean, you look at the passing stats and we know what the level of receiver talent on this team is. I mean, that's kind of a between the receiver talent and the secondary talent, you kind of know, like, this is good. These are very good players. These are some of the best players in the nation at their position groups. So if one of them shuts the other one down, that to me is, boy, the other one is really, really good. Or if you go up and you're making plays on these corners, that's impressive, because we've seen what these corners do with just about everyone else's wide receivers. So yeah, it was a very impressive day from the secondary. And yeah, sure, there was a little bit of wind and all that, but and it's a little weird and wonky and disjointed because you go in and then someone else is, what was it? There was a drive for Will Howard, and then a drive for Lincoln Kienholz, and then a drive for Devin Brown, and then I think a drive for Julian Sayin, and then you went back to Will Howard, and so and you're throwing at different receivers, and you're behind different offensive linemen, and yada yada yada. So there's a reason why no one's spring game ever looks fantastic. Like, it is always kind of a little bit of a disjointed mess. But the defensive backs were really, really good. The one throw that was out the back of the end zone, if you go back and watch that, you will see me with probably getting a look of terror on my face as I, pull back my camera to find Jeremiah Smith, and then he is very close and he is approaching me at very high speed. It was like, oh boy, this might be bad.
Coward.
Yeah.
So we do have the full stats now. I got the email. Julian saying 10 of 17, just like Lincoln Kienholz, 10 of 17 as well. But of course,
Julian saying the leading passer. How about that?
It's not important right now. We don't need to talk about that. Saying 85 yards passing. He did take the most sacks, 3 sacks on the day. Kienholz was sacked twice, threw 2 interceptions. Will Howard, 9 of 13 for 77. Devin Brown, 5 of 7 for 66. And Aaron Nolan, 5 of 7. 47 with the 1 interception, but he also was second on the team with 42 yards rushing on 5 carries. But Sam Williams-Dixon, 75 yards on 11 carries. Pretty good day by the 2 freshmen, and I don't know how much we'll see from them this year. I think the plan is to see as much as they need to, as we said, but I think you've seen James Peoples be that number 3, and I'd be interested to know if he was going to eventually be the number 3 anyway, without Dallin Hayden leaving.
Yeah.
But now that's crystal clear, and still they'll need depth there, but just want to throw those quarterback stats out there.
All right. Chocolate Chip Scoochie says it's the best defense in America. It's not even close. Best defense we've ever had. Look at how good we were last year, and then they're all older another year in the offseason. Number 2 team, probably top 10. So, I mean,
Chip Kelly didn't seem worried. And we've talked in the past about how there was some worry on some of Ryan Day's words last spring after the game, and I don't think there was any of that when you're just talking about, you're choosing. Will Howard's a very experienced guy, never really been overly explosive, has not been perfect. Devin Brown is, a top recruit who struggled last year, but is getting a ton of opportunity this spring and has looked good when we've seen him this spring. So I think they're going to be okay there, and is okay good enough? I'll say better than okay, because they're at Ohio State. You're not there for, and I think Kyle McCord was better than okay last year for most of the season. I just wasn't able to maximize the weapons around him. I think Emeka Ibuka getting hurt kind of hampered that as well. But running the quarterback more this year is going to help. We're just making that a threat. Chip Kelly talked about Woody Hayes and getting back to a little bit of the robust tee and things like that. So who knows what else we will see. We saw 2 quarterbacks in there.
Yes. Yeah, it was. They had that was a oops, we're out of running backs situation where I looked and I'm like, this is a little early to putting in a walk-on quarterback, and then realized, oh, there's also another quarterback right next to him, and he is just playing running back right now. So yeah, I'm sure. I mean, there were a bunch of guys who, like Will Trell Hartson, I know was a walk-on running back last year who I believe hit the portal. So you've got guys who they have left them a little thin. They introduced a number of walk-ons who are going to be arriving in the fall, who may be getting to play a little more than they might have expected. But Jay Blake says Chip just needs more time to perfect this thing. We'll be ready on offense by the time the season starts. It's certainly going to be, he got here late. You got to remember, not only is this his first spring, he got here late because of the Bill O'Brien situation. And, this is what spring games look like. The offense always looks ragged in the spring. The defense is always ahead of the offense. That has been true going back to the 90s. Some of those, there were some Jim Tressel. There's some
6'3" Jim Tressel.
Oh yeah,
spring
there
games.
was a 6'3" game that I was also remembering. Yes, this was high flying aerial action compared to some of the other spring games we've seen over the years.
Do you know the final score?
34-33.
Oh wow!
Yes. 34-33.
So the interception won it for the defense?
No, the offense won 34-33 because they only got 3 points for it. They were down 34-30, and the offense threw the ball up late over the middle. That's probably going to be a teachable moment, and got intercepted by, I think, Deontay Griffin. And I thought, oh my goodness, he's going to run this back and they're going to get a touchdown and they're going to win the game. And then the final score was listed in the scoreboard as 34-33.
So they blew the return down, but he returned it the entire way. Like he kept going. So I think this is maybe one that they send to Roger Goodell or something like that, or send to Tony Petitti and it's like, hey, come on.
Well, and the Jalen McClain interception return as well. I thought they blew him down for something, but
Carson Hinsman pushed him.
Did he?
Or reached out in his general direction.
Okay. Yeah, he's
citizens arrest type of thing.
He is someone who, Jalen McClain, I feel like we've heard his name a bunch just in the last 2 weeks, where the beginning of spring, true freshman, early enrollee, you don't expect anything. You expect nothing for a true freshman, early enrollee. And with Lathan Ransom out, with Malik Hartford out, there were reps in those safety spots. And Jaden Bonsu, Jalen McClain, those guys made the most of it. And, I think this is just the last 2 weeks, what we've heard about Jalen McClain. And, he's not winning a starting job over Caleb Downs this year. He's not winning a starting job over Lathan Ransom this year, but it feels like he's another one where you kind of come out of the spring like, oh, okay, like just make a note of this one. You may want to refer back to it later.
Yeah, and I wrote about this after the first spring practice, just watching him because he was with the twos immediately at free safety because of Malik Hartford. Mm-hmm. But he was calling up plays, pointing people out, sending. He had to direct a walk on where to get, and so I just thought that was impressive. And then talking to Matt Guerreri a couple of weeks ago, where he said he's always among the team leaders in their effort points and getting to the ball and chasing football. He's always running towards the football, and then he's also finding the football, and he did that today as well. So I think when you see that from a true freshman, I will say we saw it from Kai Stokes.
Yes.
So
yes,
there is that. You've got to continue to compound on it and build on it, but I don't think anybody's too concerned about that not happening with him.
Yeah. Jordan B says, is it unreasonable to expect an All-American year from Jack Sawyer? Dude looks so good coming off an amazing game against Mizzou. We barely saw him today, but when we did, he had an early sack coming off the edge. It feels like he was someone who a year ago everyone was talking about how Jack Sawyer was a bust, and Jack Sawyer was, this guy, and he's a 5-star, and he's done nothing, and you never even see that he's out there. And then last season, the trajectory completely changed. By the end of the year, he was a dominant player. It feels like he's potentially on his way to having another good year. I don't know. I'm not saying Chase Young sack totals, but it feels like he's set up to have a pretty good final year as a Buckeye.
Yeah, I think you do need bigger numbers. He's going to be a known player, which helps because All-American voters aren't always that in tune with what's actually going on. So they like shiny names and shiny numbers. So people will know Jack Sawyer because he's come back, but he's also been overshadowed by JT Tuimoloau because JT is more well known. Mm-hmm. So you are going to need numbers. I don't know how easily these guys are going to be able to build these numbers, to put up numbers when they're trying to play a bunch of younger guys early on. Now you can close strong, mm-hmm. like Sawyer did, and so I don't think it's unreasonable, but I don't know that it's unreasonable to expect a bunch of these guys to have that kind of opportunity, that kind of year, because they already have the notoriety, most of these guys. So to then put in enough numbers to get that from some voters. I think that's entirely possible. I'm not going to project anybody to do that in terms of, I think he's doing it. I think he could. I think Tyleek Williams could. Secondary is loaded with guys. I will project first. I'll be the first person to project Caleb Downs as an All-American.
Maybe. I mean,
safety
based on what? Yeah. Mika Henna says Curry looks great, and he asked if Kenyatta Jackson play. Yes, Kenyatta Jackson played. He had a big hit on I think James Peoples. He had a real big pop. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that name. With how much freshman quarterbacks develop in their first year, do you think Air could end up outshining Sayan? Already solid arm, better mobility and height. I mean, answer unclear. Ask again later. I guess it's possible. Sure, it's right now it feels like Sayan is pretty clearly ahead. There was a time when Justin Swick was clearly ahead of Troy Smith, and then he wasn't. So
I think there's now is you're going to have so much learning from now till fall camp because you'll get to look back at all of the things that you've done wrong and realize why you did them wrong, what you should have done right. So then you have the next opportunity. You'll be in the weight room trying to earn mix, regards and your teammates' regards and things like that. So there's still some time this summer you can make a move, but you can't supplant or surpass anybody until practice starts. And you'll have an opportunity, but if Julian Sayin is this far ahead or this advanced right now, it's hard to imagine him taking a step back or somebody going past him as a true freshman.
Yeah. Here's one from Troy V. The in-game interview with Day, where he talks about giving up play calling duties to spend more time with other parts of the team. He sounded comfortable with it. Bill O'Brien leaving, getting Chip equals huge. I think it certainly is a big thing that Day not only has someone, but has someone he really truly trusts. Maybe even more than Bill O'Brien. Maybe. I mean, just because he has that personal history with him. We'll see how it goes. Ohio State has brought in assistant coaches that everyone went, this is going to be amazing, and then it wasn't. And they have brought in assistant coaches where you've thought, well, I don't know, and then it's turned out great.
I remember when Urban Meyer announced Bill Davis's hiring, and you wanted to go on and talk about how great it was, and I was like, whoa, let's just calm down. This dude is at a new job every 2 years, and you're like, yeah, that's because everybody wants him. I'm like, let's just slow things down on this Billy Davis talk. But back to the Chip Kelly.
I think the record will show I was not even back on the beat when Bill Davis was hired, so you must be thinking of someone else. Who was the other guy that wrote at the Ozone? Oh, that was you. That's right.
But Chip Kelly, I thought it was interesting to hear him talk about the fact that yesterday was his first time in Ohio Stadium, and this is the first time being in a spring game with 80,000 people. How many games at UCLA would it take to get 80,000? 3
spring games?
No. 3 actual games.
Yeah.
80,000 spring games.
Yeah, boy, they will have, for those non-conference games, they'll have 30,000 people. I think if you took the 3 smallest crowds last year, you might take 3 games to get at least 2, like 2 full crowds. So yeah, it's always so interesting to see people experience the Ohio State football thing for the first time, and it's like, yes, there are 80,000 people paying to watch a football practice right now at the same time. Yes, there are going to be 30 media members standing outside of a hotel in August. I can't wait. Can't wait to see his reaction to that. Like, because that feels like something that they might just be cool. Don't tell him.
Exactly. Haze him a little.
Just let him show up and be like, what?
What the?
Have him walk in with the same look that the random people checking into the hotel have. Like, what?
Is Beyonce here? Is somebody famous here? It's like, yes, coach, it's you. And it's Julian Sayin.
Yes. And Kevin Noon's here too. Finally, the question of the day, the question du jour. Jordan B says, was that 6'7" punter there today, or is he a summer enrollee? I did not see any 6'7" Australians. He is a summer enrollee. McLarty? Nick McLarty. Look at that. Pulled that one straight out of the land down under. Do you have any other anything else that we have not touched on?
No, I think we've got it pretty well covered. CJ Hicks had like 6 tackles or something like that. And Jim Knowles talked about how he needs to find ways, he being Knowles, needs to find ways to utilize what he does best, because he's better when he's blitzing or is given like a directive. And you know, he's grown a lot and he likes where he's at, but it still sounds like there's some concern about like the reading and the reacting may not be his best quality. And when he's as athletic as he is, sending him, you know, pointing and shooting like a lame camera, you know, but developing him more as the will linebacker is going to be something. And we talked about Sonny Styles. How late would he play? He was playing in there with the twos at the end of the game as well.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think I'm good. If you've got anything else.
No, I think, yeah,
Okay.
those guys were actually the 2 leading tacklers on the day. CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles both finished with 6 tackles.
And yeah, so we'll there was actually another name in there, Tom, but it's not that important because it may have been one of your bold predictions, and we do not need to address that.
Hang on,
right
I
now.
got to remember what my bold. Well,
No, we got to go, Tom. We got to
know-
go. The internet is running out here. Inky Jones, 7 tackles, second on the team. So I just wanted to mention him again because we have talked about him. Walk-on safety Brenton Inky Jones has been making plays throughout the spring, and he did so again today. But anyway, Tom, go ahead and put your phone down. We don't have time to look at any bold predictions. We have to go, and please do not interrupt me as I am closing out this show. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for hitting the like. If you have not, please do so. And, of course, the best way to support us and what we do is to join us up at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Say hello to us there on the message board. Thank you all for tuning in. And I know you guys are all going to go watch the spring game again right now, so enjoy. We will talk to you guys